Hey, it's John Patterson, and welcome to the Influential You podcast. I'm excited to introduce you to the performer transactional personality. In this episode, the third episode of our 5-part series on transactional personalities, the transactional personality known as the performer is skilled with mood and influence. Their superpowers are the ability to be present-based, relationship-oriented people who are inclined to be highly flexible in their thinking. Their kryptonite, however, is that they may tend to halt transactions with relationship concerns or what we call mood campaigns, and they may avoid or dismiss commitments and facts. We will have someone you know well on this podcast, our host and faculty member, Josh Damigo, who will tell you more about his worldview as a performer and share a deeper understanding of where his transactional personality is an asset and where it may be a liability. But before we begin, this podcast is made possible by Influential You's self-guided program, Thrive. The Thrive program by Influential You is the place to train with other ambitious adults who are working to achieve big aims, just like you. Join the Influential You faculty, alumni, and industry specialists as we study the underlying transactions we need to build and live a satisfying life. We want to give you a free 30-day trial of our Thrive program. Just use the code 30days at checkout for your free 30-day trial. That's 30DAYS, or you can text the word Thrive to 805-262-9008. Once again, text the word Thrive to 805-262-9008, and you can cancel it anytime. Now, let's get down to business. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Influential You podcast. I'm your host, John Patterson, co-founder and CEO at Influential You. At Influential You, we teach you how to take charge of your career and amplify your professional influence. Since 2009, we have helped thousands of business owners, executives, and entrepreneurs become more influential, more rewarded, and more you. We all know extroverted people. We all know introverted people. We all know creative people. We all know analytical people. We also know people who demonstrate highly varied behavioral characteristics depending on their social environments. So, how does a personality apply to a transactional framework? Personality in transaction offers a different approach by focusing on how we behave in transactions rather than merely labeling us a certain personality type. This framework acknowledges that we all bring value to our exchanges, and it helps us recognize patterns in our behavior rather than defining ourselves by them. Personality and behaving transactionally begins with a focus on how we behave in transactions. And it acknowledges the importance and potential drawbacks of our contribution to human exchanges. And it enables us to identify patterns in our behavior. Since each personality tends to have a unique role to play, each individual's contribution is vital to the group's overall success. By recognizing and appreciating these differences, we can ensure that the collective team thrives. Today, we'll discuss the performer transactional personality. To tell us more about performers, here's Influential You faculty member, Josh Damigo.
Thanks, John. Now, you can connect with me or find out more about me by clicking on the link in the episode notes. But first, I'll say this: I'm a performer. Today, we'll talk in depth about the performer worldview, the assets and liabilities of performers, and some strategies that you may employ when you find yourself working with a performer. The performer personality tends to be present-based. They're relationship-oriented people who are inclined to be highly flexible in their thinking. Many people with this transactional worldview take on roles of sales, marketing, management, learning and development. Many may be public information officers or have public-facing roles. The relationship wins with this personality, and if they're not careful, that same concern that they have for relationships can cause breakdowns within their other projects. Performers' worldview is one of constructivism. You can think of this as those who construct stories, because performers construct new understandings, new knowledge, and new narratives for themselves and literally for all of us. You may be very skilled in working with other people, and you may be seen as a connector in many of your social groups if you're a performer personality. Now, here are some of the assets of performer personalities. As you heard before, performers tend to be present-based, relationship-oriented people who are inclined to be highly flexible in their thinking. Performers have a superpower when it comes to walking into a room and lifting the mood or setting the tone or intention, as many performers are natural storytellers and have a gift to make others feel included, welcomed, and appreciated. Performers are skilled in influence and relationship, and they are often found working on present-based strategic projects. Skilled performers can craft strong narratives that make it easier to bring more resources to your project, your aim, or your business. Performers are often seen as sociable and gregarious, and they tend to move in positive to overly positive moods. Performers do have some liabilities, as that fear of losing the relationship and social pressures rob performers of much of their value. Many times, performers can be seen as flaky, and they often dismiss commitments that they've made, and they often try to get by simply on likability. Now, performers must be careful not to construct negative moods as well as toxic positivity, as they can often craft narratives through emotions and not facts. And these moods may spread throughout their social groups quick. The lack of strong commitments can often cause performers to stay in a world of intentions, where they intend to do things right there in that moment, but then avoid doing the work and action that's actually necessary to complete projects. They also might lose interest when things become a little more difficult. That's why a strong work ethic is especially important for performers to instill within themselves. When performers are in the midst of breakdown, they can become quite annoyed or intolerant of others. They don't take disrespect very well, and they definitely don't like being told what to do, as they value their freedom. Performers tend to see others in groups as respectful of the entire group, or buffoons, because they're not respectful of the group. And they tend to be more wired to social cues than many of the other transactional personalities. In many situations, performers are too sensitive to social cues, and it actually works against them in transaction. Now, here are a few quick strategies to work with performers. Firstly, if you'd like to identify a performer, listen very closely to these kinds of phrases. We could, or you could. And saying could, or the universal we, is quite often what performers do, because they don't want to commit to things, and they also want to make sure everyone feels included in the conversation. Performers may often show up late for meetings, and they tend to apologize rather quickly, even if they're not at fault. You may recognize that they talk a really big game, but then disappear when it's time to actually do the work or action that they promised. When you find yourself working with performers, remember to make your request exciting or fun, because performers are much more inclined to be interested when you deliver information to them in an interesting or novel way. But remember, check on their work. They will hate to let you down, so be sure you let them know how they made you feel when they're out of compliance. That's all we have today for the Performer Personality. My name is Josh Damigo, and I'm a performer. I'll pass it back to John Patterson for one final word. John?
Thank you, Josh. That's all for our podcast today on the Performer Personality. See the show notes to connect with Josh and talk to him more about the great work he's doing for us here at Influential You. My name is John Patterson, and we'll see you next time on the Influential You podcast.